Right, so thank you very much for everyone who's been able to make it today. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro before we hand over to Ollie, but it's mostly just to tell you about, so those of you who have been here before will be more than aware of what I'm about to tell you about. But anyway, I'm going to talk about it anyway because we've put tickets on sale. So NoCode Arcade is coming to Northumbria University on the 21st and 22nd of June. So it's about just under 3 months away. What is NoCode Arcade? It's a new community conference for no-code and low-code developers and makers. And it's been organised by Sutherland Software City in partnership with the Digital Catapult Northeast Tees Valley, Dynamo Northeast, and obviously NoCode Northeast. The conference is going to be part of a larger festival that's going on in Newcastle. If you're not a Newcastle or Northeast native, this is a big festival that's going on across the whole of the Northeast from the 19th to the 23rd of June. There's tons of events going on as part of Tech Next, but NoCode Arcade is obviously the best. And this is a bit about what we're going to be doing. So on the first day, we're going to have a platform arcade, which is where we're going to have workshops with different platforms showcasing what they can do, and an opportunity to learn about different platforms. More details will be released about that on as we build up to it. And then the second day will be a full day conference, 16 speakers. We'll have panels, we'll have keynote speakers, and we'll have other people speaking. But you're also welcome on the website to suggest a talk if you've got a no-code talk that you want to come and give to the audience. And there'll also be a developer arcade, so there'll be an opportunity for people who have developed an app or something that you're selling, or set up a startup or something internal, anything that you built with no code really that you want to tell the world about because you're dead chuffed with it. There'll be an opportunity for developers to do a bit of a sort of lightning presentation for their apps as well. So yeah, that's a sort of taster of what will be happening. The super early bird tickets are available now. The half price at £25. That includes lunch on the second day, yeah, you get full access to the workshops and the conference for that. You can also buy on the website tickets to the Tech Next after show party, which is on the Thursday night, so the night of the conference. They are at a charge, but you do get free drink and food included in that. I think they're £20 all inclusive. So yeah, that's NoCode Arcade. You can get tickets at nocodearcade.com. Yeah, and hopefully we will see you there. I'm also going to do a shameless plug for a completely different event that I'm organizing with colleagues at Software City and at partners, looking at tech for good. If anyone is interested in the tech for good space, we're looking particularly for technology companies and technology self-employed technologists as well. Anyone involved in the tech space, basically, who's interested in working closer with the volunteering community sector and social enterprises, to chat about how we can do that. We set up an event, collaborative event for voluntary sector and digital companies, and found that not that many digital companies turned up. So we want to understand why. We want to understand how can we make it easier to work together, and look at our Tech for Good agenda in terms of digital inclusion, digital adoption, digital innovation across the Northeast, and how we can improve the collaboration going on there. 2 links at the bottom there: the website for Tech for Good Northeast, where you can sign up for updates for future events and various other things, is techforgoodne.org, and the Eventbrite for this particular event on the 20th of April is techforgoodroundtable.eventbrite.co.uk. And we're doing this with our partners at Vaughan, the Community Foundation, and Dynamo Northeast. So if anyone's interested in that space, do sign up, come along. It's a couple of hours. There's a full, on the Eventbrite page, it's a full agenda and what have you, so you can go and find out more information. Right. So that leads us on to my contact details. No, that leads us on to me to introduce. Let me just unshare my screen. Introduce Oli, who's very kindly joined us from Stacker, and is going to tell us a bit about his no-code journey and also a bit about Stacker as well. So Oli Littlejohn, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Adam. Nice to meet you, everyone. So I'm Oli. Yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit about my own kind of journey into no-code and some of the stuff that I've built and how I ended up working at Stacker. It happened kind of suddenly and surprisingly about 9 months ago. And then I'm going to just do a bit of a build with Stacker as well, just to show you, what you can do with it. With a group this size, I'm really interruptible. So please, if you have questions or comments, don't feel like we're waiting till the end. I would love to, even if you want to question my first sort of deck introducing myself, then, I want to, that's totally fine. Let me bring up my screen and hopefully this will work. Can you see this okay? I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I want to get on to actually building something fairly sharpish. So this is actually Stacker. I built my deck in Stacker. Stacker's not really for this, but I just thought I'd give it a shot and see how it works. So you are my guinea pigs for this tonight. Normally I'd use Canva, but I think it's why not? So really quick intro to me. I'm Oli. I'm from London originally, from Highbury, but I have lived in Edinburgh for the last 17 years or so. This is a picture of me in West Lothian, in Jupiter Artland, if you've ever been there. And right now I'm community manager at Stacker. Stacker is a no-code tool. We're going to talk a lot about that in a bit. But before that, I worked at a company called CodeBase, based in Scotland, for about 9 years, building up a entrepreneurial, startup-y tech hub type thing there. And I left just at the wrong time, just around about the same day that they realized they were getting 42 million quid from the Scottish government to grow their activities across all of Scotland. And now they're doing that. But that comes with its own stuff as well. But I love community things. I love no-code and I love startups. And in fact, I run NoCode Scotland as well, which is an organization that does no-code meetups up here. If anyone ever wants to come up north of the border to see how we do things here, please do. I came across no-code actually when I was producing a podcast called Startupification, which don't worry, you don't need to have heard of. A friend of mine did it and I did the production for it. And they did this episode about this thing called no-code a few years ago now. And I felt at the time it sounded too good to be true. This idea, oh, we've got a listener. No way. Yeah, so that terrible sound quality, that was all me. So I came across, and I thought this is too good to be true. I've tried to learn to code so many times in my life, but I've just never been able to actually do it. I thought I'll give this a shot. I'm going to try and investigate some of these no-code tools and actually build a software thing. I wasn't quite sure what it was at the time. And I started building with, I decided to make my life difficult and started building with Bubble. I don't know, do people in the room use Bubble? Any show of hands quickly? A little bit. It's one of the harder ones to learn, to be honest. It's pretty sort of unforgiving when it comes to the interface and how you design with it. But I built some stuff. I built a few tools. And as I got more and more into this world of no code, let me drag around my Zoom settings. I kind of realized that I'd actually been using tools like Airtable and Notion and Zapier. Are these tools people use on a daily basis, weekly basis, any of those? Yeah, so tools for database tools in inverted commas, not, somewhere between spreadsheet and a database, process management tools, automation tools. I had been using those, but I just never heard of the word no code. And it was only when I came across this podcast, I was like, oh, okay, so that's what that stuff's called. And I've built, I think 3 SaaS apps at this point with Bubble, a tool for speech and language therapists to work with their patients better. They literally still write stuff down on pieces of paper, post it to the person, and it's all kind of just very, very old-fashioned, not even sort of crap software, but just pen and paper. So built a thing of that got some traction. A community plugin, I'm obsessed with where communities meet no codes, especially Slack communities. I love building plugins for Slack. And I built this community tool called Set, which I actually sadly RIP closed down about 2 months ago. It got some traction as well, but I'm just I just wanted it to stop distracting me, basically. And now I'm building a new plugin for Slack called Chapeau, which is like a gratitude bot, but it's all built with Bubble. It's all no code. I like just hacking around building kind of silly projects like these. But the truth be told, over the years, I've built way more like internal tools. So at CodeBase, I built endless systems involving Notion, involving Zapier, involving Google Sheets, and just sort of basic tools kind of duct taped together to create a process. And they weren't really tools, but they were more like processes linked between different tools. And that's kind of actually, well, off the back of all of this, I started organizing some no-code events. I organized a little no-code conference in Scotland. Stacker heard about me and said, hey, you like community and no-code, do you want to come and join us? And it took them a few goes to woo me over, because I love CodeBase. I love my old place as well, but I eventually joined, and it's awesome. Like, it's a great place to work. So Stacker, how many people remember actually, before you sort of saw this event, how many of you have actually heard of Stacker? I'm curious. A show of hands. Okay, I see a couple. Okay, nice. I'm going to assume that everyone who has their camera off is like, yeah, I love Stacker. Yeah. But really, Stacker is about building internal tools. So rather than the sort of entrepreneurial stuff that I talked about, where you're trying to build like a SaaS tool to sell to users, it's about building stuff within a business. And really, I guess it's about thinking about how you manage your process within businesses, because I guess when you start something new, like you start an event management sort of system within your company, or you start an affiliate program, or like even just a way to manage your HR or ops. Quite often this stuff just starts out as, especially in a small business, as a conversation. Maybe there's a whiteboard. Maybe there's like, sometimes people use things like Miro and stuff like that to kind of just scrappily throw ideas together. And then over time, this thing becomes more complex. And eventually it becomes a spreadsheet, maybe, or maybe you start with a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are great. I love a spreadsheet. I'm a sad person, but they solve a lot of problems. But eventually spreadsheets do reach the point where they're just so big and so complex that no one really remembers how they work anymore. And you can almost feel sort of guilty changing something in a spreadsheet. If you sort of sign up and you change things accidentally, or whether you meant to or not, you kind of can break them very, very easily. They're just a sort of wall of information that the context is often lost. And I guess that's where Stacker kind of steps in, because historically what you did is you bought an off-the-shelf SaaS tool. Like, you would take your spreadsheet and you would buy an HR tool, or you take your spreadsheet and you'd buy an events management tool and move over to that. But Stacker and this new raft of internal tool building no-code things asked the question of, what if you built that new tool yourself around your workflows? So instead of transitioning into some app that was built for every events management person out there, or every operations person out there, what if you built your own version of that thing? And I think that's really cool. I think it's a cleverer way to go about these things, because every business is unique and will have unique workflows and unique processes. And that's how I've ended up where I am today, and what Stacker does. So if it's okay with all of you, I'm going to start building something. I thought I'd build an events management portal, because I think it's something we can kind of latch onto as an idea. I actually even wrote a sort of brief for this, as if, I don't know, like I was talking to some fictional client. God, sorry, the Zoom controls are so obnoxious. I'll have to get right in your face. Yeah, who uses Notion, out of curiosity, in the room? Fans of Notion? No, okay, a few people. There was a running joke in CodeBase that I gave everyone Notion sickness, because I kind of got obsessed with it and insisted that we all use it. And now they still do, and it's like, it was one of the big things that I brought in. But yeah, I think I fell in love with Notion a little too much. But if you could imagine, someone has come to us and they have this spreadsheet full of data, or these spreadsheets, more importantly, like the data is all over the place. Some of it's in CSVs over here, some of it's in, a Google Drive over here, so maybe in an Airtable, yada, yada, yada. They've come and they said, we want to build one place to store all of this information. This is the kind of brief that I would imagine. Is obviously super basic, but we are a company that run a community event space. I'm kind of leaning on my CodeBase experience here, but you can imagine a sort of place, be it sort of tech related or not. And you need a way to have, for your people who are running events in your space, to communicate with them. You're sick of playing endless tennis with email, like questions backwards and forwards. you're losing information that's not like in the right area, or it's just a kind of mess, this system. And you want to create something that kind of keeps it all in one place. So I won't read all of these out, but it gives you an idea of what I'm going to try and build in front of you right now. And yeah, if the words live demo don't make you nervous, then they really, really should, because everything can go wrong. So before we get started, any questions on that? No? Nope. Okay. Now, I believe there was a talk about Airtable semi-recently. I see a nod from Adam. I don't know how many of you saw it, but I'll give a quick overview of Airtable. I'm not going into too much detail, but Airtable is kind of a hipster spreadsheet. It is somewhere between a spreadsheet and a database. It gives you this kind of familiar column and sort of row type format where you can have information stored. So be it events or users. And the difference is that you can have different types of fields. So for instance, it might be that you want to say that this contact telephone number for these users is a, I think that's actually literally a phone number field, yeah. Or you can have multi-select things where you can decide so people can only be a certain thing within that field. Like you can decide that this person here, Aria, can only be an event organizer or an admin, say. And there's loads of these different things, and it just allows you to kind of structure your data differently to, say, a spreadsheet where it's just, it's kind of free form. You can just have column headers, and most of the time, any information can go in there. And the reason I'm starting with Airtable, even though this is a talk about Stacker, is that Stacker actually started as a way to build apps on top of Airtable. That's not true anymore, and I'll show you sort of what that means in a little bit. But historically, and Airtable is where I started learning no-code stuff, that you could build these quite complicated sort of database type things with automations within them that sort of managed all of your data. But the problem that Stacker solves for Airtable is how can you give people access to that data in a kind of sensible way? Give them access to specific fields within this database. Maybe you don't want people to be able to alter or see all of the information. You want them to only be able to see bits of it. And we've all seen what a spreadsheet looks like when it gets too big. It's kind of intimidating. What if you can display that information in a way that is just a little bit easier to digest? So I made this dummy Airtable with some dummy data, and these aren't real people, believe it or not. Aria Duke from Apple with this email address is not a real person. I put in some sample fields, and I've done the same for some events as well. So if we had some events coming up, this kind of thing is the kind of stuff we host. Company barbecues, apparently, we host with sort of the kind of information that you would need to manage an event: start time, end time, summary, the status of the event, some kind of behind the scenes things like dietary requirements, not needed for a Zoom call, which is a handy thing about doing it this way, but useful for like IRL events. And the other thing that I've done here is I have linked these two tables together. This may be sort of old news. Was that a cat? Yes, cat invasion. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. Great cat. This idea of linking two tables together, this may be old news to many of you, but I just want to explain it because I think it's a really important thing that often gets overlooked. So we have these two tables. We have a list of all of our events, and we have a list of all of our users, people. And what we're trying to do here is make sure that Airtable understands that there is a link between some of these things and the other thing. So I have linked, which way around did I do it? I think I did it this way. I have made a linked field which says each item in this list, so each person is somehow connected to an event. They are that event's organizer. And I can go in here and I can change and say Aria is the event organizer for any of the events that appear in that event table. I think she was a design webinar event. And you can do it so they could be an organizer of multiple events as well. But it's a really important thing to understand that you can link together these two databases. But yeah, put a pin in that for now, and we'll come back to it because you'll see why in a little bit. So yeah, that's my data. That is the database for this app that I'm going to build. Simple, but enough to get us started. I'll pause just for a second, just in case there's any questions. I'm not really going to be coming back to Airtable, but any questions on that bit? Yep. Okay. Sweet. So back over to Stacker, to my deck. I hope that worked okay. I don't know. And I'm just going to create a new app. I'm going to call this our events management tool. You can actually see up and down on the left-hand side here, these are a list of all of the apps that I've made in this particular workspace. So it might be, if you're building internal tools, that you have like, you know, your HR tool over there, you have your events management tool, you have your sales pipeline tool, your marketing assets tool. You can kind of have all of your different things, as you would in something like Notion as well. You have these kind of sections for each of your team to log in and see, you know, the information that's relevant to them. And you can control access to that depending on the app. But I'm going to create a new tool because there are never enough tools out there. I'm going to pick an icon. This is always kind of difficult. Yeah, I mean, that one says events management to me, and choose a color. Not really important, but nice for the app to look good. And this is me greeted with the sort of basic open, like Stacker, you know, nothing is here yet. You can see there's not really an app here yet. But I'm going to go over to manage my fields and data. And what I am going to need to do is link this to my Airtable. If I go to settings, then here are a list of the data sources you could add. So I created my data in Airtable, as you can see. But you can use Google Sheets. We have lots of other data sources as well. I won't focus on them too much because they're actually just for enterprise customers, but for like things like Stripe and Intercom and Zendesk, like loads of sort of other things that you can pull your data in from. And I am going to do the thing that you should never, ever, ever do, which is I'm going to go over to Airtable and I'm going to briefly reveal my API key. Now, I'm a trained professional, so please don't do this yourselves. And all I'm doing here is I'm linking together my Airtable and my good evening to that person. That is happening like just over there in my flat as well. So, you know, I'm there with you, don't worry. And I'm going to add my sharing link here. And this is just saying, this is the database that I want to bring over to Stacker. Now, just to dwell on that API key point for a second, I'm sure we all realize this, but if you don't, like never share your API key with anyone or don't show it in a public event because it basically gives someone access to your database. Now, I created a new Airtable account just for this event. So that key will be deleted by the end of it, basically, but never do that normally. And so all this has done is imported a bunch of data from Airtable. That seems to have worked. And in fact, if I go over to my data grid, so this is where the database within Stacker exists, you can see that that same information, there she is, Aria Duke, has been imported into Stacker. So, and here are my events as well. And this has preserved, you know, everything like the different, single selects and multi-select fields that I had. If I go over to my so it has linked it has preserved the links database as well. I'm not seeing it in my users page. We'll maybe come back to that one in a second. Maybe I'm just being blind at the moment. But I now have all of this data with my app. And in fact, it's already kind of made a bit of an app for me. It's not the most glamorous looking thing, but that data has been taken in here. All my users, so it's showing all of their information as standard. But if I click through to one of these, that is the information from Airtable being displayed. So job done. I kid. There is a lot more to do here. But Stacker has two views. It has a list view, so a list of everything in the database, as you can see. And then if you click through, it has a detail view where you can see more detail about each of those things. So list view, good for like a high level look at all of your users, detail view for, getting some, more details about that person. And just in terms of data, the other thing so we do have a built-in database. You don't need to use Airtable for this. I actually prefer to use Stacker tables most of the time because you can just have something that is totally kind of a single stack tool, basically. So rather than having to have your database over here and your sort of front end over here, and maybe you use something else for your automation over here, I prefer to keep things simple. But there are many, many advantages to using Airtable as well. The biggest one being is that I can create one in advance and just kind of get going in terms of the Stacker build during a meetup. And in fact, cool thing is you can combine different data sources as well. So I'm going to do that later on, I think. We have a little cheat sheet of what I'm actually going to do here. And in fact, if I come over here and just quickly show you all of this information from Airtable, I can't edit anything like the schema here. This is all locked in from Airtable. I can refresh the schema. So if I added some new fields over here, it would bring them through if I click this button here, but I don't actually edit the setup of the database here in Stacker. Just a small point there. But let's start making this app look nice, actually, because that's my favorite bit of these things. So pretty unimpressive looking kind of list of users right here, but let's go over to the edit layout paintbrush over here. And I'm going to start just by changing the sort of overall appearance of this page. With tools like Bubble and Webflow and things like that, you have endless customization possibilities, and they're good for that, but they're also bad because they very quickly teach you that you are not a designer, and actually making apps look good is hard. Stacker tries to make that a lot easier, basically, that you can make your app look pretty decent without having a degree in design. If I go to display, there's a bunch of different ways I could display this data. I can have cards, probably settle on that one because that one looks okay. Rows. There are things like Kanban and Inbox as well, which we'll come back to. Calendar. They wouldn't really make sense here. I'm not going to display my users as a Kanban board. It wouldn't really make sense. But to me, I think cards looks sensible. Seem to have already got their cover images up here, so that is good. I can add some information at the top, like to say wonderful users. I mean, they're probably not all wonderful, but let's be generous. And I can choose which fields I want to display here as well. So I can have for me, these are all about like that sort of high level information. I don't think we need the about section here. I think we just need that person's name and maybe their contact email, especially when there's lots more faces going to appear here. I think that would make sense to me. So I am going to turn off the about bit just by clicking this toggle here and the company name and save my layout. I think that looks okay. As a kind of list view of our users, it certainly looks a little bit more accessible than this here. If you imagine this list, but it has 1,000 users in it, or 10,000, you can certainly see how there are better ways to kind of access that data. And we can come on to how you sort of filter that down to the most useful information in time. I'll do the same to the events page real quick. I actually think it makes sense to keep this as a list view. I don't have images for anything, but I think I'll just keep the name of the thing. I think the start time is probably important. I mean, Adam, you organize events, so you can tell me which of these fields are the most useful, but I think a name, a start time, and a summary seem sensible to me. I'll save that there. And one other thing I think would be useful here maybe is to see events that are upcoming and that are in the past. So from my workflows, when I did this kind of stuff in CodeBase, I wanted to be able to sort of have in front of me all of the events that I knew were coming up, but I also wanted to be able to, check back on the data of old events as well. And to do that, I am going to use the duplicate layout button. So this is going to take the same data source, our list of events, and kind of split it into two. And it will look exactly the same. So we can call this one past events. And so these are currently just showing the same information. But I'm going to rename this one to upcoming events. And save, and hopefully that will change. There we go. And now I'm going to filter this page. So we'll say that it only shows information if the start time is before, what are we on upcoming? No, so the start time is after yesterday. I guess we would maybe want to see the events from today as well. So this is like dynamic filtering of data, basically. So we're only going to show the events that are today or after. There's maybe a better way to do that, but And we have no records there. That is hopefully expected, depending on when the start times are. And if I filter this page, our past events, and I can filter it so the start time is before today, then hopefully these will all stay here. Cool. Yeah, so I can look at these start times. Yeah, these are all in the past. But if I change this coffee morning to, I'll actually go into the data grid to do this. I change the start time of this coffee morning to be in next week, and then go out here. Then you can see I now have these two lists of data, upcoming events and past events. And you can use this to create as many different views of your data as you'd like, not just based on dates, but based on what is useful to your users at that time. So you can filter it down to based on specific criteria that might be helpful to them to get their job done. So I'm going to show you detail view styling as well. So coming through here, this is looks kind of rubbish, doesn't it? But let's try and make this a little bit nicer. I'm just going to delete and start from scratch for Milton Sparks, definitely a real person, his profile. So there's a few templates you can use. You can use like a listing, which probably isn't right. I think a profile probably makes sense. And I can change this. So let's have his email and his, maybe just his email up there, kind of the most useful bit of information. Then there are all of these different types of ways you can display data, like you could have a highlights field. This could show information like the most useful stuff, like maybe his company name, Milton Sparks from Facebook. We could have his email. Oh no, we've got his email already. Contact telephone. Yeah. And if I had a fields thing, then I could have his about section as well. So just a bit of, I don't know why he would need a bio for this. Remember, this is one of our event organizers. They'd be signing in to sort of look at their events and update them. I don't know why they would need that, but it seemed like a useful thing to add. And I think maybe, what else do we have? Actually, that might even just be it. One other thing I can do is do a related record list. So remember how we, is this working? Yeah, so remember earlier when I was talking about linking together these two tables, Stacker understands that as well. So it understands that Milton Sparks is the event organizer for this coffee morning that's coming up. So by adding this list of upcoming events, it can say on his profile, there are your events. A handy little thing. Then there's all sorts of other little widgets you can use, like you could embed Google Maps or Figma or some other tool that you use. I know a lot of people embed Calendly as well, you know, that kind of stuff if you need some external sort of things to augment your app. Things like quick links, which I quite like, which looks terrible like that. But if I save and continue, it's all squashed because of the profile thing. But, you know, if you need to add like little widgets to kind of point people towards another bit of the app, very, very useful. And so if I save this, I think this looks okay. This looks like a profile in any SaaS app to me. Like if you sign into your HR tool to book your holidays, it kind of looks like this. And I'm going to fly through doing this for the events as well, because it's a similar kind of process. Let me just check that I'm actually on track for my things I wanted to do. Okay, yeah, well, we won't overthink this bit here. Maybe add some highlights that have like I think the start time and the end time are generally pretty useful. The kind of text to do with it, so like the summary of the event and the description, you know, the stuff that will go into the Eventbrite. Maybe do another highlight here as well. I think I had a type of event somewhere. Maybe not. Excuse me. It's the beauty of live events. Yeah, so I did have a type, so I wanted to have like online and in-person things, but that is not here. So let me just find it very quickly. See where it's gotten to. So it is in my data grid. It was there all along, wasn't it? It was probably right in front of my eyes. You know what? It's a highlight field. I am being silly. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. But if I put type here, you can see that this event is an in-person event rather than an online thing. And I'm going to add something that is just going to be for event organizers as well, which is a pipeline widget. So this is something for, when you're managing these events behind the scenes, having a way to see, how far along something is. People use them for like sales funnels, but also for like project management as well. So let's say this event will have any of these, maybe not cancelled, but if I make this possible for people to interact with, then now we have quite a nice way for the admins behind the scene to be able to sort of indicate to everyone else how far along this event is. Right now, everyone can see this in the app, but we're going to come back to how we change that in a little bit. And I think that's probably all we need for here. Oh yeah, I was going to create a, I'm going to create something now and come back to it because it might be that you're interested in gathering dietary requirements, say for, an in-person event, to make sure that everyone has some food when they turn up. So I'm just going to use a call out widget because remember the event organizers can see this page. And if I have it as like a warning, it says, you haven't submitted dietary requirements. Then I'm going to have a conditional visibility, which says, so this is basically a way to decide which of these elements appear and when they should appear. And I'm going to say if the details of dietary requirements is empty, so they've not filled in behind the scenes, they've not filled in their this kind of box. I'll add something now. Actually, I'll add it in Stacker. That's what I'll do. So I stop jumping between these two things. So if they haven't filled that in, this warning will appear. So whenever they come here, they get a reminder of, hey, tell us who's gluten-free, if someone's gluten-free. But if I add something here and say, yes, one of them pesky vegans, I can say that I am one. So, I'm allowed to make fun of us. And if I now go to this coffee morning, you can see that that has that is not appearing here. But if I go to a different event where those details haven't been filled in, then boom, little warning saying, hey, you need to do this thing. And conditional visibility is so powerful for these kinds of apps. It's the same across my experience of building with Bubble, of building with Webflow. Changing the experience that your user gets depending on conditions is kind of just, it's kind of software engineering, right? It's making it usable for a specific user rather than making something that is usable for everyone. So what else do we need? I thought as well, it might be useful on these pages to have an activity tab. So this is something built into Stacker where you can add little notes about an event. So you can have multiple tabs up here as well. So if you had too much information to come here, so maybe you had like a bunch of event images that you wanted, but you didn't want them cluttering up this main page, you can add another little tab up here so people can sort of click through them to find the right thing. But the activity thing means that someone can just say that, I don't know, they've not paid their invoice yet. Or perhaps it would be something that you'd actually want to communicate with the organizer of the event. Maybe not with quite such harsh terms as that. Although that's not appeared for me. Maybe because you've not paid your invoice. Do you know what? I think it's maybe because I'm actually not logged in as a user. We'll come back to that. I'll demo it in a wee bit. But yeah, so you can, I think this is looking pretty good. This is the kind of SaaS tool that someone pays $50 a month for, right? For their, to run their events. I hope if anyone wants to buy it, then, send me an email afterwards. And lastly, I'll just give you a sort of quick look over of how like navigation works in tools like this. So you can rearrange this thing on the left-hand side, showing, where your users are. Oh, that won't change anything. The order that all of these things appear in. It's not changing. I feel like I need to save it. You can change where the navigation is if you want like a traditional sort of that kind of experience to your app, like with the nav bar at the top. And yeah, change workspace color. Lots of kind of little things you can do just to change the look and feel of it. You know, have a logo at the top and stuff like that. Rename it. But that's kind of it for styling the app. I still have to talk about like building sort of automations and actions into this as well as permissions. But any questions on that kind of stuff? I like to leave it uncomfortable.
On the timeline thing, I didn't realize you could click to then move it along. I've always went edit at the top and then
you can't on ours, Ben.
All right, okay, that explains it.
Deactivate to make sure.
I've never tried. That's all. I've never tried. So
No,
when I see it, I'm like, oh my god, I didn't know we could do that.
Oli actually activated it. I think he did it really quickly. You didn't see it, but you can turn it on or off. And I purposely turned it off for ours because actually, if you click on ours on certain ones, it'll like send out notifications and stuff. So I wanted the alert to come up and say, are you sure you want to send this? So yeah, we deactivated it. But yeah, you can enable it.
All right.
Yeah. I did a ninja click there. But yes, yeah. Cool. So I'll come out of here, and this is great. If I do say so myself, but what I think is, more useful for your users is having ways to interact with this data. That's the whole point here, right? Rather than just having a database where people can kind of, add information and sort of, add another row here, blah, blah, blah. Having a kind of thing that feels like an app that lets your users interact with that data is the next thing we can do here. So what do we want to do here? Let's maybe make it so there's a couple of ways to skin a cat here. But right now there's just an edit button up here. And if you click this, your users and you will be able to edit any of the information in here, which might be all you need. You can't edit highlight fields, which annoys me sometimes, but it is the nature of how things are right now. But you can click edit and edit anything in here. That might not be what you want. It might be that you want your users to be able to see something but not edit it, or you might be able to want to control beyond just them editing everything on this page, like just down to specific fields. So let's look at that second idea first. So over here in the edit thing, I can add a new button. So you can see the edit button is here. I can toggle that off if I want people not to be able to edit things. I can also, in terms of skinning cats differently, I can also do that via permissions. I can change, who has access to edit permissions for this, or update permissions for this particular record, which is a record is just the name of the bit of data. So in this case, an event. Same with delete. I can add a delete button if I want to give my users the ability to delete. I can control that via permissions as well, which I'll show you in a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to make something that let's do update dietary requirements. Actually, that seems like something that I've anchored this on. It's a long thing for a button though. Dietary requirements. Let's see if this works. And there are two things you can get a button to do. Either you can get it to update a record within an app. So we're going to get it to do that. We're going to get it to update the dietary requirements of this meetup, of this book club. Or I can get it to trigger a zap in Zapier. So like, I'm a big fan of Zapier. It basically connects every app to every other app. So it could be that when someone clicks this button, it then signs that person up to a mailing list, or triggers an email being sent to someone somewhere else, or a message in Slack or Teams or blah, blah, blah. Loads of things it can do. You could have it when they click this button that, turns on lights in your house if you really wanted to. I have done that one before, but it's not a useful thing. I'm not going to show Zapier today just because it's a whole different talk. But I'm going to make it so when someone clicks this button, here are all the fields that we could give them access to. So let's talk about dietary requirements. So this one here with the question mark, this is just a checkbox, like tick, there are dietary requirements. I'm going to let them do that, but I'm also going to make them give me the details of the dietary requirements. And you can have a default value, so either checked or not. I'm not going to do that. Give it a label. This might not look very good. but we'll see. And we want users to be able to edit it. And I'm not going to make it required. I don't think that's necessary. And then details of the dietary requirements. No default value, so I don't need to specify what should be in there. Rather than user and not required either, because it might be that there's none. And I'm going to call this information. I'm going to say add to this button. Tell us about your dietary requirements for your event. Just so that is crystal clear. And I'll save this and let's see how this looks. I'll toggle it on over here. Now if I come out, click that button. So now let's just look. So right now we know that for the monthly book club, there are no dietary requirements submitted. So, but if I click here, I can say, yes, there are dietary requirements and the details are gluten-free, say. And you can see immediately that little pop-up has disappeared very satisfyingly. I was slightly worried it would stick around. And if I go behind the scenes, go to my events and scroll over here, yeah, then you can see that that thing has updated. And just to be clear, like this is now all updating in Airtable as well. So if you have built automations or have other tools talking to Airtable, they know about it as well. So maybe as well, let's just add another button. I add something that's about, I have a detail behind, I'm calling it behind the scene. That's like a new thing in the database that is a number of registrations for an event. Just so we know how many chairs to put out. So I'll do the same thing again. And I don't think I need any of these actually. I don't need a default value because it's going to be different for every event. And save that, do this one. Please enter your registrations. Hit button. Now that person can do that via here, and you can add in that many people. So that's one way that your users can interact with your data, but we can actually control this in a completely different way using permissions, which is perhaps the bit where I'm dreading because it just inevitably goes wrong. Like permissions, doesn't matter what tool you're building with, whether it's Bubble or yeah, you name it with a no-code tool. If it has users and you're trying to set up, sometimes they call them privacy rules. They take a few goes. It's like putting on legs on an IKEA table. You kind of get them on like most of the way, and then you have to go back around and tighten them up because something's like not quite right. Like you'll see what I mean. Hopefully I get this right first time. But the thing I always say to people building with tools like this is be sort of, don't be harsh on yourself. Like it takes a couple of attempts, even for sort of seasoned professionals. I'm not saying that I'm one of those. So you can configure permissions in Stacker in a pretty granular way. So I've got my two tables here. Actually, I'm doing this in slightly the wrong order. I'll put a pin in permissions for about 2 minutes. I'm going to sort out my users, actually, because what I've not done is given anyone access to this app yet. So once you've set your app up, you've got your data in there, or at least enough of it, and you want to start testing it with people to log in and use it. There's this manage users section of the app here. And you can just invite people. So I could send, an email, well, let's say James's email in here. And this will send an email to james@example.com, inviting them to sign up and register for the app, and then they can log in and access the app as you would expect. And if I go over here to my data grid, there's actually a separate thing, user table here. And you can see all of the people who have access to the app. If you need my email, there it is. I'm sure we can share it afterwards as well. But I'm actually not going to do it this way. There's another way that you can manage your user table, which is instead of using the built-in one like that, where you just list all of the people you want to log into your app, I'm going to use my Airtable. And again, there are many reasons you might want to do this. For me, it's just as the event organizer here, I really like Airtable as my central source of truth. And I want to keep all of my user information in there rather than just in Stacker. So role-playing this event organizer here. So I'm going to say that the people who can access my app are the people in that user table, Aria and Milton, was it? And I need to give an email, because this will be the email they use to log in. So give them this one here. And then I can either decide, which people in that list get access manually, or I can just do it automatically. So I can say everyone gets access, or they can only get access if perhaps over here I have, a separate checkbox that says they should have access to the app. And I could say they only have access to the app if that checkbox is ticked, something like that. But I'm just going to give everyone access because that's simpler as far as I'm concerned. And these people aren't real anyway, so, that's fine. So now I have this list of people who can access my app. I'm going to go back over to, I'm going to unpin permissions off the cork board and come back over here. And this is basically now only showing one table to be our users, rather than having the separate user table down here. Simplifies things a little bit. I kind of flew through that. Any questions about users and user tables and actions so far? I like to leave an awkward silence when I ask, are there any questions? And I feel that was awkward enough. I'll save you. So now I can decide what information people in my app should be able to see. And I'm going to start by just doing basic permissions. We may get on to advanced permissions, but for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. So let's take a look at our events. No, let's take a look at our users first, actually. So we only have one type of user, the person who logs in to manage events or manage their events. We may want to add an admin eventually, but for now, we've just got them. So this user can, when they log in, see on the user table, so that's the other users, they can read, they can see all of that information, they can update all of that information, they can create new users, and they cannot delete things. So that means that I can actually log in as Milton right now and see and update Aria's profile, which I think is suboptimal for how I would imagine an app like this to work. But through the magic of permissions, I'm going to change it so users can only see, I'll keep this simple for now, I'm only going to use one type, but I'm going to say that they can only they can only interact with some records, and I'm going to make it so they can only interact when the record that they're looking at is the user's profile. So the logic here is Milton has logged in. Milton, there are potentially 3 profiles that Milton could look at, but Stacker is going to say you can only access the one that matches your current logged in profile. So whatever email address you've logged in with, basically. If I do this, you can see I can also give permission for users to delete stuff here as well, rather than just enabling that delete button. But I don't want my users creating new users ever. Like, that's my role as the sort of manager of this space. And I want them to be able to update. What do I want them to be able to update? I want them to be able to update the user type. So that's, are they a user or an admin, which is something we might want to use down the line. I'm going to allow them to, not their email either. I want to be in control of that. And not their name. Maybe they update their name just by emailing me or something, just so it doesn't get too confusing for me. And now, so my permissions look a little bit different here. And this is where I pray to the permissions god that when I log in, if I log in as Aria, so right now I've clicked this button over here, which is preview as, so I can preview as any of my users. If I preview as Aria and click, then I can only see Aria's information. And in fact, if I go to edit, I can't edit her name or her email, which is what I wanted. Whereas if I preview as Milton, boom, I can only see Milton's information. Now, keen-eyed people, eagle-eyed people amongst you might have noticed that it's not a great thing to have to log in and then you kind of just see one person here. there's a trick we can do to make it so they log, if someone logs in, they go directly to their profile, but we might have time to come back to that. And let's change our event permissions to, we only want people really to see, if I was running an event in a space like this, I wouldn't want people to be able to see my event data. I'd want them only to be able to see their own event data. I think that makes sense. So we'd say they can only see some records, and we'll say only when the record matches, and this is where the linked thing I was talking about, I went on about a bit too long before earlier. The users table is linked to the event. So if the user is currently linked to a specific event, they will be able to, these permissions will apply. And I'm probably going to only give them, I'm not going to, no, actually we'll want them to be able to create events. But what about updating? Let's leave this as is for now. Actually, have I set this up properly? I feel like since I made such a big deal out of, it being difficult to do this, I need to make at least one mistake. Oh no, but it has worked. So if I log in as Aria, then I can only see the events that Aria has booked in with us. Or same with Milton. Can only see Milton's events, the book club. Okay. And there's one more thing I want to do, and then we can just take a moment, breathe, and I can do some more advanced things if that's of interest, but I'm also happy just to kind of, gauge the room on that one. We do want our users, once they've signed up for this portal, to be able to add a new event. So if they come here as we log in, then Milton, we want him to be able to say, I've got a new event coming up. And you can see, well, that's interesting. This was a brand new app, but it seems to have styled this view slightly for me anyway. So this is called the form view in Stacker. So basically when someone wants to add something new to your database, and everything here will just go into this database in Airtable, it'll add a new thing here. And I can change these forms. I don't know why this is here. Normally when you load these up, they look very different, but something is awry. Have we come across a bug? Well, good news, I know exactly where to report this. No, maybe we're okay. So what I could do, and in fact how this normally looks, is you could just have it so when someone wants to add an event, they can just pick all of the details that can go in, like, just fill in the form. But most of the time, that's just not what you want, because some of this stuff is back office, right? Like, the users, you don't want them to be able to decide who the user is. Maybe the type of event, the status, that's your planning thing. We don't want them to be able to do that. But let's make this form look a little bit nicer. So for a start, got a call out at the top. So, no, not a call out. The banner, yes. This is all very new. We just updated the form view in the last couple of weeks, so still figuring it out. So here's this form to add a new event. Make sure you read our code of conduct first. And we get a button here, say, going to the code of conduct for the events. Just in case there's like a key bit of information we want to get in front of people first, or maybe it's like booking details or something like that. And then we could get some basic text here, like so the name of the event, the start time, end time. Maybe we don't want like a summary or description like the sort of marketing stuff yet, but we do need a link. Actually, no, I'll do a clever trick with the link. And we'll say type so they can decide if it's online or in person. Now, let's save this and let's put another field block in here, and we're going to have it be a place where people can show the link. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use conditional visibility here again. So I can say, what do I want to do? If the type here is online, then this is visible. So let's add some more context here. I could do some placeholder text. Let's say, please put in your Zoom link, or you know, anything like that. And if I save this, when someone goes to add an event here, so they've come through, if they then select online, then you have to put a link in as well. Well, you don't have to, I haven't made it required, but you can add some nice sort of bits of conditional logic to your forms. It's not the most sort of robust conditional logic compared to like some other tools like Typeform and things like that, but it is pretty, you can build pretty complex forms within Snacker. And I'll change this because I think we do want these to be required. I think we want the start time to be required. I think if you're organizing an event, you want to know when that is. And yeah, that is perhaps it. You wouldn't know dietary requirements or registrations until just before the event. So we'll just leave it there. I think that's enough. So save and come out of here, and then I can preview this as Milton, say. And I can add a new event, say, NoCode meetup, add a start time 6 minutes ago, and say it's in person, and then click save. And what I didn't do there was link it to Milton. But you can see this has created that basic bit of information within our Airtable as well. Yeah, there is a way to link it to Milton, but I'm not going to do that just now. So yeah, there's some more stuff I can show, you know, in terms of advanced permissions, even just kind of examples of what people build with Snacker. But since I've come up to about an hour there, which I think is pretty good going to build something like this in that amount of time. Imagine how long this would have taken with code, right? Am I right? I'll take a pause just for a second and say, you know, ask again, like any questions about like either not just this build, but like no code, like in general, like, you know, it could be Stacker related or I don't know. I'd love to just kind of hear someone else's voice for a bit.
Ollie, if people don't have questions, I'm just wondering whether I'd have to do it very carefully, but I could actually show our internal system that we use as a means to sort of show here's a final, not final, certainly not final system, but here's a use case that we've used for it, for example. Would that?
I would love that. And yeah, I think that's kind of the beauty of these tools, especially with internal tools, right? It's not the tool, it's the process. It's always evolving, right? Like it's you know, there's no final version of any of these tools ever. It's going to be a continual evolution, and you can do that with a no-code tool, but you can't always do it with like a SaaS tool.
Yeah, and we've I wasn't prepared for this, so just bear with us. But we're constantly evolving and sort of bolting things on, which is generally a good thing. Also comes up with some interesting bits. And I didn't realize there was conditional logic in forms, by the way. That's a new thing, isn't it?
Newish. Yeah. I actually only discovered it very recently. But yeah, I wish we had like a redact button for like people who want to demo their app, who would just like kind of blur out everything, like API keys, customer data, and you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right, I'm going to go carefully with this because I have to just bear in mind, because we've got sort of personal contact details and things, so I'll try and avoid any of that. But just quickly for people to give a sort of an idea of how we've used this, and it's not all updated in terms of images and things, but this is a system we use internally for various different things. So we've got in here the projects. So if you come into projects, well, when you first log into the system, for example, you come to my projects, and these are all the projects that I'm listed as a participant in. We've got departments, so you can go and see the various departments of the organization, who the head of department is, a little bit of text about each of those departments. You can see what support I'm working on as a person, so support the different organizations. Each of the projects has its own little icon, so I know which project that's part of. It's one of the bits I should stay clear of. Events, so we've got in here all the events that we work on, and that's all pulled primarily from Eventbrite, although we have events that are not particularly in Eventbrite, in which case we can add them manually. As you can see, we've got an add new here. We've also got
how do you pull them in from Eventbrite?
Zapier.
So Zapier to Airtable.
Yeah, the only this is all Airtable based. The only thing that we still haven't quite worked out yet, and I think I found a way recently and then forgot it and haven't worked on it, so I'll rediscover it. But I couldn't find a way to get the images from Eventbrite. Pretty much everything else we could get in, and all Eventbrite registrations come in here so we can see the number of people registered for an event as well, that kind of thing. So if we go into yeah, I'm not sure. I'll actually, let me just check on the.
I was going to say, be careful here.
Yeah, so we've got here attendees, so you can click on attendees and see all the attendees that are attending that particular event. You've got event details as well, and the comments thing that you mentioned earlier on. So yeah, each of our events kind of got a page like this. So you can see all the events that go inside the organization. We've got a cool thing for Proto, which is our immersive building, I guess you could call it, where all of the bookings are handled inside of here. But there is also a separate app called a Proto booking system, which all of that data is primarily managed through by the Proto team, but it also comes into our centralized that everyone's got access to. So it's the kind of really positive advantage of using something like Stacker, is that you can have different apps with different access for different purposes, but using the same data. So we've got a booking system there, for example, that we use. It's a calendar view and also the inbox view, which you didn't show there, Oli, but you can get the idea with that. It's kind of, you can flick through the events quickly and see the details. Organizations, I think it's fair to show those because that's not private or personal information. We've then got what we call tech verticals. This is our categorization of the different tech organizations we work with. So you can go in and see things based on the tech verticals. People, which I'm not going to click on, but that comes back to that's the people inside of organizations. Referrals, and then we've even got a roadmap in there for sort of looking at what things we're adding into our app that the team can go in and add new ones to if they want to. But kind of I think the really cool power in this is, so I'll go into Digital Pathfinders, for example, which is where we've done the most amount of work. So in Digital Pathfinders, we can see that this project is led by the delivery team. So you've got the digital adoption team and who the project lead is, a description of it, the project details in terms of yeah, all sorts of stuff in there. And then the project team, so the people who are working on it. Now that project team for this project is not only Software City employees, but it's external people as well. And likewise, as I mentioned before about the booking system, we've got a Digital Pathfinders CRM system that effectively people who are partners in that project can log in and just see the data of the people who are on that particular project. So it means that we've got the ability for large projects like Digital Pathfinders to isolate a bit of our data and put that into one system. That means that the data is only shared with, it keeps all the data sharing agreements intact, as it were. You can also see across the top here what Oli sort of demoed earlier on. This is the bit that Ben said he couldn't click on, which he did on purpose, because if we put in if we change some of these, it sends out different types of information. So the main things we have inside of a project will be the support that we've provided, which I think I can put in there. So you can see the number of projects that are in progress, the number of support projects that we've done, the estimated number of hours and the total number of actual hours that were delivered, and all of this is the Kanban view, so you can see all the projects that are in process. You can see the events that are happening, and you can see here the Eventbrite doesn't pull through the image through, as I said, but these are all the current events for this particular project, and then the previous projects are all listed in there as well. We use in Eventbrite, we use the organizer, so we create organizers for each of our major projects, which mean that it just automatically pushes those events into those projects. Activity stream I'm not going to go into, but we've created something called activities, very similar to your traditional CRM activities. But we also, within support, so each of the support items that you can see in there, we have activities that people log. So Ben, for example, when he's out or when he does a meeting with a client, logs that activity in there, gets logged as hours against the support, and that then goes into an automated process in order to sign that time off in terms of ERDF and state aid rules, which we have to fit for all of this. Again, all managed through this, linked to Zapier and MailerLite, if I remember rightly. So we even do things like every activity that we log, it checks the EU currency conversion for that day and pulls in what the equivalent cost of that would be, so that at the end of the project, when we sign off the support, the email is sent to the user, got a MailerLite form, they click on a MailerLite email, they click on the link that's created in there that links to a Jot form, pre-fills all of the data we need about them, and then just asks, pre-fills it in hidden fields so you don't actually see it. So the form just looks like, you give 10 out of 10 for everything, because we provide 10 out of 10 quality, obviously. Write in and say whether you're happy for a testimonial to be shared, and then sign it with a signature on Jot form. Save that, it then pings it back to Airtable to say that it's been signed off. But inside that form, they're signing off the exact amount of hours that they've had, the total in euros based on different activities happening on different days with different exchange rates and so on and so forth. So it's quite kind of, it does a lot of different things, but this is Stacker provides our view on all of that.
It's a little more complex than what I just built.
A little bit more, yeah.
Super impressive.
A little bit more time, to be fair. We also have referrals and projects, and we also have outputs. So the outputs is where we can go and see when they've been signed off. So this is where we can see that it's actually, we can go and report those outputs back to the funder, because we know they've actually been achieved. So we've gone through that full thing. So compared to, say, a normal ERDF project, there's where we, some of our staff, before we built something like this, were spending per support, could be spending 1.5 hours per support. And as you saw in there, we've done 200 and something of them. So it saved, hundreds of hours of work, basically, to be able to automate all of that. And we can replicate that now throughout different projects that we do. Mm-hmm. We have a project pipeline, we have a project archive using some of those different views. And tons of other, just basically all the data now interlinks and what have you. And while we haven't got it to where we want it to in terms of the sort of impact measurement and some other stuff that we want to be doing, and it's not rolled out across the whole organization yet, it's massive in terms of the power that it provides us. And this entire system, haven't kept a track more recently, but I'd say it's primarily taken me about 8 to 10 days development, and that's everything from the Airtable base, the everything, the integrations, the currency stuff, all of that kind of thing. So that's a bit of a finger in the air, but yeah, I'd say it's probably about that, which, being an ex-Drupal developer, even in Drupal, which was fairly point and click, it would take outrageously more than that to develop something of this complexity, especially when you add in the fact that we can now access that data in different places. We've got a public digital Pathfinders hub where people can sign up to the events if they've already registered for previous events, and they get a login to that and various other things. So yeah, it's super cool. And it's got to be for the right type of I think, Oli, you'd be the first one to say it's got to be for the right type of application. But as you said, it's for internal apps and that kind of thing. The power is and the speed at which you can develop very usable and manageable permission-based apps is crazy fast. So yeah, hopefully that was a quick whistle stop just to give people an idea of.
I might ask you to do that again, but for the Stacker community at some point, maybe, with sure. the sanitized data. I'd love that. Yeah, and to ask the obvious question, but not the obvious question with the obvious answer, was there an off-the-shelf tool that could have done that?
No, I mean, that's why, we started off with a lot of that data in Airtable. So obviously Stacker was the sort of obvious choice, especially because when we adopted Stacker, we're talking, I can't remember exactly how long, but it was before your time for sure. But it was, as you said earlier on, it was the main system that allowed the main opportunity to visualize and put permissions onto data that was held in Airtable. So I originally started in Airtable, and it was almost by chance that I stumbled across Stacker, and it just happened to do exactly what we wanted to do, which was primarily the main reason we initially adopted it was the fact that it gave us the opportunity to think organization wide, but allow access to things project wide, and that's having that one database, but giving lots of windows onto that data in a secure, permission based way, was super powerful, and I think is something we'll continue to use for future projects and continue to use in different ways. But yeah, super powerful. And I think, just to answer the question you mentioned before about Airtable as well, the main reason we use Airtable is because, and we haven't started this, but me and Ben had a meeting about it the other day, but the hope we'll now have, so we use that Airtable data for other things, but the hope that we now have is that, for example, we'll be pulling some of that project data in order to populate our Webflow website using WhaleSync. We'll use some of that data to then go into Notion to create databases in Notion that have our client database in there available to use against, you know, the documentation and things that we're creating. And that data can basically be used pretty much wherever we want, synced primarily through, as everyone will know from a previous talk we had here, about sync through WhaleSync. So so it's super exciting. I think there's, you know, all the tools have different use cases, and I think that's our main reason for choosing Airtable, is the fact that it gives you those different opportunities to use that data in different ways, carefully, obviously.
If you ever want to talk to someone about the WhaleSync Airtable to Webflow connection, so NoCode.tech, who are the NoCode resource hub that I learned NoCode with, founded in Scotland, but acquired by Stacker last year.
They don't Stacker own that, yeah.
Yeah. So they do that exact thing with WhaleSync. They keep all of their data in Airtable, and then they have Webflow as their front end, a very shiny new website that they kind of sync between Airtable and Webflow.
We had Matthew, one of the founders from WhaleSync, speaking at one of our previous events. So yeah, it was a great talk as well. But yeah, anyway, hopefully that gave your voice a rest. But I can very much vouch as a advocate of Stacker as a means to manage data in a very cool way for our team, at least.
Can I show one more thing in Stacker? I appreciate, you know, people sort of ready to, you know, have their evening glass of wine or whatever. But it would be remiss of me not to show one of our newest features that I think the product team and engineers would. I'm going to show custom pages, because otherwise they'll come for me. You know,
I haven't actually used it yet, and I was saying to Ben the other day that it looks like one of the most exciting things, because actually, if it wasn't clear to people, I'll just make this point, Ollie, that when you pull in data, particularly when you pull in data from anywhere, what Stacker automatically does is effectively create a space for each of the tables where you can represent the information in different tables. But I'm assuming, Ollie, that custom pages gives us a bit more control over what appears across different parts of the app.
A lot more control. So yeah, historically it was basically you had your databases, your user and events tables, and many more, and then it would display that information. You could split it down as we did, but you had users and events, you know, and it kind of mapped to that. What we've just added in the last couple of weeks is the ability to add a page that isn't linked to a data source. So you can now have a blank page, and we could have some information. This is good for, like, you know, welcome to the Lens app. Maybe some information about, you know, actually we'd probably do that in a header, I suppose, but all of the different widgets we saw before, where you can add kind of a landing page with like information to point people to where they need to go. But also we just added data widgets as well. So now within here, you can take any of these tables and show them kind of inline rather than having, you know, just have them over on your events page. So basically you can build a kind of fully customizable page with kind of sections where you can display different types of data, and again, all of the different widgets like embedding and things are there as well. So yeah, this has been a big ask in the community for a while, so I'm glad we've got it out the door now. Yeah, make it look a little bit nicer than that, maybe. Yeah, okay. I won't show any more Stacker. I think we've seen enough of this this sort of type of thing for a while, for tonight. But yeah, any questions, like even if they come to you sort of, you know, in the middle of the night tonight, feel free to email me and ask. You love building with Stacker, but I just love the no-code ecosystem generally, and I'm always up for kind of just talking about like if there's a different tool that you're particularly interested in. I'm happy to try and help and just hear about what you're building. I think that's the most exciting thing for me, is this kind of new generation of software engineers, dare I say it, who are building this stuff. So yeah.
Does anyone have a question for Oli? We're going to call it a night.
I think I have a question.
Knew I could
Very
count on
interesting. Thanks, Oli. Yeah, throw something in there. You fairly quickly went over the form aspect. So I think I've tend to ask these kinds of questions. I was thinking about how users are going. If I put this in front of clients and I want to gather some data from them, I know it's I don't know who this question's for, to be honest. It might be for you, Adam, or Oli, I don't know. But Adam, you said you use Jotform. You mentioned that in passing. And Oli, you showed the quickly the kind of default form and the idea that certain fields could be hidden, and this, I think there were conditional fields in there as well. So I'm just wondering, why would you use Jotform if that functionality is in Stacker? And that's probably the easiest first question.
I can certainly answer it, because it comes up all the time in our customer Slack about the various different form tools that people use, because people do use not just Jotform, but there's sort of 5 or 6 kind of key players. And I guess it's because, so 2 reasons, like one very sort of straightforward one is that we don't have public permissions. So you can't share a form publicly if it's in Stacker. You can't share any of your pages publicly. You have to be logged into the app. You have to be given permission to access it, right. Which is something I would like to change. I would like to see change, to be honest. But we're very much about building tools. Big one. That is a very big one. So a lot of people do it just for that. But tools like Jotform and Typeform and even Tally, to an extent, they are dedicated form builders, and perhaps one day our functionality will catch up with them. But that conditional visibility that I showed is very basic compared to some of the more advanced ones. And I think if you are trying to, for many businesses, that form is crucial. In fact, my old job in CodeBase, basically it took nearly a year to make one form for people who were applying for the kind of various programs that were going after on there, like literally a year for a Webflow page and a form, because sometimes you just need to have that level of complexity in it. And Stacker has some, but not the sort of full whack.
So that makes sense. That was kind of what I was expecting you to say. So the next question is how you connect the two. Is there an integration between various form, SaaS offerings and Stacker, or is it via Zapier or something else?
You can certainly use Zapier, but it also depends on the database that you're using. So if you're using Airtable,
so if it's going into Airtable,
yeah, there was a form builder. What was it called? It came up a lot recently because
there's a new one that's just come out that I've just signed up for that I haven't actually used yet, and I've forgotten the name of it as well.
Is it Form Stack?
No, it goes directly into Airtable, so it literally pulls the Airtable data, so you can literally see the form elements of your Airtable table. I'll add to what Oli said if I can, Oli. Just on the other reason why we use Jotform, and we use it for different things. The big one on the form that I mentioned before, as in the evaluation sign-off form, is actually a Jotform support signatures, whereas some other form providers don't. So that was a big one for us because we have to have a sort of visual signature, as it were. But the other massive one for the application form, for example, is the scale. So and Oli kind of mentioned this, but I'll mention it from another perspective, which is not just the conditionality, which is important, but also the fact that, for example, our application form for our program, actually, rather than going into one content type as say a form in Stacker would do, it goes into like 4 or 5 different tables. So some of the data goes into the person, some of the data goes into an organization, some of the data goes into a support, a support item that we could create. Some of it goes into an activity. So we'd log an activity that says that form's been filled out by that person in the CRM side of what we've built. So there's all these different places where that form data is being put into. And as far as we can tell, actually, for some of that complexity, I wouldn't say Jotform's the only one that can do it, but it's definitely the best. But it's all done primarily through Zapier at the end of the day. Most of the direct integrations with the forms and Airtable tend to be fairly on-off kind of thing, whereas Zapier gives you absolute complete control over every bit of data from every field into every bit of the database. So that's why we've used Jotform. But there's plenty, as Oli says, plenty out there. But Jotform just has a very, very high level of complexity and configuration that is hard to get in most of the inbuilt form systems.
I think it was Fill Out was the name of the one I'd heard. That's the Airtable native one. I've just put it in the chat if you want to check it out. But that's a great summary. Thank you.
A kind of similar question. I'm guessing it's the same answer, really. But again, Adam, you mentioned MailerLite. So a more general question about, we need to email a load of people for whatever reason, do some bulk emailing. Is that again something that would then connect into Airtable? Because, for certain use cases, you want to be doing more straight to a marketing list. But for other more internal tools, it is to a known client list. So, for our clients, maybe we could use the, on the forms side of things, maybe we could use a stack of forms. What happens if we want to do a bulk email to, 1,000 people on a list of clients or past, leads and prospects that we've spoken to? Is that something anyone's done?
Do you want to go, or will I would say, yeah, generally it's about connecting it to, so yeah, for that kind of internal CRM, like talking to known clients, like you can certainly use it for that in a kind of HubSpot or Salesforce-y type way. But for like mailing a big group of people, I mean, I use MailChimp just because I know it. Like, I don't think it's necessarily the best tool out there, but I wouldn't want to run something like that through Stacker at the moment. I have seen, people building on both Airtable and Notion a lot recently, like trying to create sort of, send your mailing list directly from these tools. But for me, I think there's a lot of sort of magic that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to, making sure domains don't get ruined by sort of emailing out 10,000 people, that kind of stuff that MailChimp and all of these providers do offer as part of, part of their service.
Sure. So again, the principle of having, a fit for purpose app, they've solved a load of the many problems, for instance, with bulk emailing. Totally understand that. The problem for me is always about how just to sync the data. So I have a new client and how do I make sure they end up on the right list in MailChimp or MailerLite, and then they get unsubscribed there, and I need that data to come back through into Stacker. So I've got my that centralized single source of truth.
I've been fighting with that for the last couple of weeks. For our Intercom is our central source of truth for the customer side of things, and I've been building a thing to link Intercom to MailChimp, and I thought I was good at Zapier, but it turns out like I was sort of table stakes Zapier capable, and but yeah, you could absolutely build a Zap that would link MailChimp. I'd need to actually check it out to see what, in terms of like unsubscribing and things like that. Zapier will definitely connect the two, but just in terms of making sure it has like if person unsubscribes in MailChimp as one of the features.
It's one of these things that sounds simple to begin with, and then when you get into it, there's more and more ifs and buts and different conditions where you want things to happen.
Just to add into that, I would always be assessing where the type of emails that you want to be sending for the type of reasons you want to be sending. So, for example, the main reason we use MailerLite in this context was because they're simply transactional emails, right? So they're templated emails that you set the template up, and MailerLite had excellent templates in order to do this. It's a very low cost. I think it's even a free package, and all we do is send variables to MailerLite, and it sends the email out nicely formatted with all the data variables that we want in there. Which was we're only doing maybe a few hundred of those a year, basically, because they're just signing things off, right? In terms of larger stuff, in the past we've always used I'm going to forget the name of it now. the other transactional, the big transactional email one that
SendGrid.
SendGrid, thank you. Yeah. So we always used SendGrid because that allowed us to do bulk if we wanted to do bulk and do transactional if we wanted to do transactional. The template and stuff in SendGrid is a lot more complicated in the sense of there's not a kind of a no-code point-and-click interface that you can then quickly put in variables into the email. And, you know, MailerLite took me about 15 minutes to set up, whereas, you know, that was going to be way more in terms of SendGrid, and the cost of SendGrid is way more. So obviously, but there's tons of them out there now as well in terms of the different ways of sending email. And if you're looking at marketing emails anyway, obviously there's a question mark as to, you know, in terms of how they're designed and how they're pulled together from the data that you're sending out. You know, if you're looking to just send a notification or something, that's nice and easy, right? Because you just type in a bit of text and it just fits into a nice, almost like a letterhead email. If you're looking to send out, you know, something from an RSS feed or from a, you know, or from a database.
No, I wouldn't be looking, personally, I wouldn't be looking for that degree of automation. It's just when I go into that mindset of, right, we've got something we want to shout about.
Yeah.
When I go into MailerLite or MailChimp, I need to know that the data is correct. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
So people who've
MailerLite
new clients have been added to this list. I just don't need to think about it. That's essentially where I'm coming from.
Which is why MailerLite's a good option in that it doesn't hold the data. The data is being pushed to it from via variables. Do you see what I mean? So it's transactional email. It's not holding the data about those people.
MailerLite's for marketing emails as well. So we've done that in the past with a system where we had an integration. And we had that two-way activity. So we basically had a CRM.
Yeah.
When someone unsubscribed, we had a representation of that in the CRM. And then when we added somebody new or set their settings on the CRM, then likewise we would set their status, add them to MailerLite to the correct group based on whatever settings had been set on that individual in the CRM. That's kind of where I'm coming from, where it's an internal-ish tool, but it's also got these connections that go outside. So we've got this growing list of both clients and prospects over time. And then occasionally we want to say, right, let's send an email to all of this segment or that segment or everybody. And when I go into I put the hat on of sending the email, absolutely, I'll go over to MailerLite.
Yeah.
I've just checked and I went into Zapier and it's definitely possible. You can do a two-way sync for, you know, unsubscribes and subscribes from Stacker to MailChimp for sure. Can I say I love that phrase or that word internal-ish. I'm going to use that a lot.
But yeah, no,
I'll see if the domain's free.
I think I need to double check it, Dan, but that I am actually talking about MailerLite here because I've got a horrible feeling I'm actually. But the system we use for the emails in that transactional case doesn't hold any of the data about the users at all. It literally takes a string of variables, uses the API to then send the email, and you've sent it the email address it needs to send to, rather than.
Is it Mandrill?
No, it's but it's a similar system, and it's cheaper and well, freer, let's say. Exactly, free-ish for internalish tools. But that was one of the main points for us, was that there was no these are people signed up to a program, not to a mailing list, and so we didn't want their details in MailChimp. And MailChimp generally is about, for me, would still always be about sending the email from MailChimp, primarily because you've got the beautiful tools to be able to build beautiful emails in MailChimp, right? So it's a tricky one, and obviously it depends on what you're doing with all the different emails that you and how you send emails. But I'll look up what that app is and let you know, because it.
Right.
I think it might be the
I think between you, you've answered it. It's there are options there and things to go and play with. So
one thing I would definitely advise against is not using the Airtable mailing system, because every experience I've had with that was horrible. Airtable's got in their automations got the ability to send emails out from different automations. But the only two ways of doing that are either through a branded email that has Airtable brand on it, or using like Outlook or Google Mail, which is messy. So my experience of that was take it out into Zapier and put it into something else. But yeah, there is all the options to send emails directly from Airtable, and obviously Stacker being the front end, you change stuff in Stacker, it's going to trigger the stuff in Airtable as well. Again, another advantage of using the two systems. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? It's actually, we started it for the first time, started this session when it was light, and it's just starting to get dark. And
I was just looking at everyone's pictures and being like, yeah, everyone's screens, and it's so nice. Just this last couple of weeks, I feel like my mood has shifted massively.
you can tell the people with backgrounds on, William, I think, because you're looking very grey, but your background's looking lovely and bright still. All good, right? Well, Oli, thanks so much for coming in and doing that with us. That was really insightful. And we'll put it up on YouTube as well, because you know, there was definitely a lot of people asking to get a feel for what Stacker does in the community in previous events and on our Slack and what have you. So yeah, appreciate you giving your Tuesday night up. And thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you in around a month's time. And do sign up for those tickets for NoCode Arcade if you can make it.
Thanks so much for having me. Like, really appreciate it. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
Thanks, Oli.
Nice evening.
Thanks, Adam.
Cheers.
Cheerio.
Thanks all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.